Thank you to everyone for joining me on this session, which is called You Can't Spell Supply Chain Without AI, Humans in the Autonomous Future. And we're going to discuss some of the ways that AI is already disrupting supply chain and logistics especially, and also how we expect this to play out in the future with the role of humans, and also the post-COVID-19 world, changes that are happening right now. Now, one of the most frequent questions that we get from logistics leaders is, what are AI and machine learning in the context of logistics, and why? So that is, why is AI disrupting the industry? Why do I need to know about it? And what is this technology doing and or going to do for us? And very importantly, there is a lot of attention around how AI and automation in general is going to disrupt the labor market. So some of this is good and some of it is bad, even very bad. And there are forecasts of entire categories of human labor disappearing and being replaced by, well, robots, like these two handsome gentlemen on the slide. And some of that has been playing out in the manufacturing sector for decades, but is now accelerating. So this talk is really going to look through that lens, specifically for the logistics industry. We're going to have some real talk about what is happening and what's going to happen, to see the implications of AI and automation playing out globally. And to do that, we're going to drill down into how a very specific form of AI, namely autonomous vehicles, is going to be a game changer. And of course, we can't not talk about COVID-19 as well right now. So let's first answer the initial fundamental question. What is AI in the context of logistics and supply chain? Well, here are some examples. First, we use the SCORE framework, which helps to define some supply chain fundamentals. And if we look and drill down into the framework, we can categorize the types of AI and the performance attributes that they'll affect. So from left to right, we have real-time forecasting to improve responsiveness. That's one example. Another example would be cognitive procurement to reduce costs. Another would be automation on the shop floor and predictive maintenance to make assets more efficient. And we have automated warehousing and AI-powered fleet management to improve agility. So another thing that we can't, of course, not talk about is COVID-19. So we might as well just get straight to that point. This data is already a little bit stale, a couple weeks old. And the situation is changing daily, but you can see that in the most highly consumerized market in the world, the US, that a pendulum has swung dramatically. Retail and hospitality workforces have been culled in mass numbers, and delivery of food and retail items is taking its place. Now, the supply chain and transport industry before COVID-19 was already 9% of the Australian and US GDPs, and it's 15% of the Chinese GDP. And it's already going through one of the most transformative disruptions probably since the invention of the airplane. Now, what was already in process with generally single-digit growth in things like e-commerce and grocery delivery now has been replaced with double and even triple-digit growth in some places. And what was already a strained and fragile supply chain is now being absolutely crushed. So of course, the pendulum will swing partially back as restrictions ease and people rely less on home delivery, but it won't swing all the way back. And if you're a conspiracy theorist, maybe you should look at Amazon in the list of who had a lot to gain from a global pandemic. Note that in this chart, Whole Foods is the lowest on the chart in terms of change in grocery delivery, but that's set to change when they launch Prime Grocery Delivery next month. But for traditional brick and mortar retailers such as grocery stores, this has actually been awful for them financially. Here in Australia, the Woolworths grocery chain has 6% margins in store, but online that drops to 0.5% margins. So volumes are up, but they're currently losing money on the transition to online. And that's where automation and optimization AI will actually come to the rescue. So my company, Adiona stands for the Roman goddess of the return journey. And we actually provide optimization and automation AI to the logistics industry for things like smart bundling and planning. And one of the innovative companies here in Australia that is one of our customers and is addressing this crush on the grocery delivery market is called Drive Yellow. And they provide an on-demand gig delivery fleet that is cheaper and more flexible than the groceries maintaining their own fleet assets. As you can imagine, point-to-point deliveries of single grocery orders using a sedan or a bicycle or an e-bike are far less efficient than milk runs using the groceries trucks. So Yellow uses our AI-powered optimization algorithms to automate and optimize the scheduling of thousands of grocery orders per day. And this drastically increases their speed and their volumes and reduces the workforce costs. And while this is still a human-based delivery fleet for now, our infrastructure will help them eventually transition to a mix of connected autonomous vehicles that can leverage our automated bundling and routing and improves itself automatically using machine learning. Now, let's set the COVID-19 disruption aside for a minute because it's going to take a long time for these things to stabilize. And if we go back to last year's data from the Transport and Logistics Industry Reference Committee, it shows that in the last 20 years, jobs in the logistics sector have absolutely exploded, far outpacing the population growth. And a good example of that is in road freight transport, where from 2000 to 2018, employment levels increased by 43%. And their projections show the pace of growth increasing. So we can assume that this is going to be a much higher in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. So consumer expectations, especially around e-commerce, have created a race to the top, and they're going to create a race to the bottom. And it's my belief that technology is going to be the deciding factor in which organizations are winners and which are losers, because there's no way that human labor can keep up with this pace. Or is there? Let's qualify that assumption a little bit, because if it's true that human labor can't keep up with the pace of consumerism and growth in logistics and e-commerce, it means that you should stop teaching your kids to code and get them behind the wheel and teach them to drive. In Australia, 80% of logistics businesses report a skills shortage primarily in truck drivers. And indeed, in the US, truck driving is the most popular job in 29 states out of 50. It provides a critical backbone of the logistics industry. And as I mentioned, this is 2019 data, so we can only assume that this is going to be drastically accelerated today in the wake of COVID-19. So clearly, if there's such a high demand for truck drivers, for example, then wages in the supply chain industry and pay in the supply chain industry must be high, which is true. And in fact, wage growth in the supply chain sector, so this is the rate of growth of those wages, is growing faster than IT and science and engineering based jobs. It really is. And if wages are high, then people should be gravitating towards those jobs, right? If that's simple economics saying that. But it's false. And so that's actually not true. And we see that entry into the industry, transport and logistics, as measured by apprentices and trainees, is at an all-time low. And so a simple fact remains: people don't want many of these types of supply chain jobs, especially young people, especially people interested in STEM and IT and science and engineering. And we need a radical change in skills to support this huge industrial shift. In a survey of supply chain and operations people conducted by DHL last year, nearly 70% of those people said that there are perceptions that the logistics industry profession lacks status and it lacks opportunities for career growth. And this has a very high impact on employers' ability to find, attract, and retain talented people. And for some of these companies, that's their own fault, because only a quarter of those companies say that the supply chain function in their company is seen as equally important to other parts of their business. But what is going to happen with AI coming? You'll hear many people at many conferences, including this one, telling you that AI is coming. And we've heard it all before over the last few years with things like crypto and blockchain and drones and virtual reality. And how many of those technologies are in your daily life right now? Well, AI is different. AI is in your daily life, and your phone is using AI every day. And the biggest inroad of AI applications, aside from phones, and especially related to the logistics industry, is going to be in autonomous vehicles. So what you see here is the Gartner hype cycle. And you see that in 2016, the Gartner hype cycle had just one entry for autonomous vehicles. And it was in what they call the peak of inflated expectations. So that's literally where the rubber hits the road, and you have to wonder, will it start getting traction, or will it sink and not gain traction? And if you look at a lot of the other technologies in there, some of them have not gained any traction. Now, if you fast forward to 2019, autonomous vehicles did something different. They've advanced so rapidly that in the 2019 hype cycle, they've actually split it into 3 separate entries just for autonomous vehicles. Whereas look at how many of the other items on 2016 list have dropped off, or flatlined, like drones, which just aren't advancing quite as fast. So AI-powered autonomous vehicles are real, and they're coming to rescue parts of our supply chain. Now, let's talk about some examples of how that's happening right now, and how it's going to affect the human labor involved. Where is AI going to embed first in logistics? It's in trucking. So autonomous vehicle technology is already gaining momentum around the world, with trials underway in almost every major country. The economic opportunities of such vehicles are projected to be at about $95 billion a year, creating 16,000 direct and indirect jobs just here in Australia alone. And the added benefit of automated heavy vehicles is also minimizing the economic cost of traffic congestion, which in Australia is about $16.5 billion a year. Now, what you see on the screen is a Tesla semi-rig. So Tesla is producing this truck, and they've confirmed that it'll start rolling off the assembly line. It was planned for 2020, but in the wake of COVID-19, we'll see if they are able to stick to that schedule. They're not saying how many pre-orders that they've received, but it's supposedly very significant from some major companies. And while part of the lure is that it's all electric, we all know that Tesla is banking a huge amount of on-road data intended for autonomous driving from their passenger vehicle fleet. So they'll be in a great position to be a leader in semi-truck autonomous vehicles when the legal systems catch up and they're allowed. And another advantage of a Tesla semi-truck, in my opinion at least, is that it goes 0 to 60 miles an hour in 5 seconds. I assume that's when it's unloaded. So major companies such as FedEx, Anheuser-Busch, Walmart, and Frito-Lay have been placing orders for these Tesla trucks in a bid to reduce their company's carbon footprint, switching to electric vehicles. And there's pressure to make good on these deliveries very, very high. And another great example is Rio Tinto, the mining company here in Australia. So they currently have 73 fully autonomous mining trucks that haul iron ore 24 hours a day. Just last week, BHP announced that they had purchased a fleet of 86 autonomous haulers for their coal mines. And that comes without laying off a single worker. Fortescue has a fleet of 112 driverless trucks that deliver a 30% improvement in productivity and are on track to become the first iron ore operator in the world to have a fully autonomous haulage fleet in the first half of next year. So I love this example. This is something that's happening right now, and it's called truck platooning. And so this refers to intelligent caravanning of groups of semi-trucks. They use V2X technology, wireless communication, for collaborative assisted cruise control between 2 to 5 semi-trucks. And this allows them to follow each other and autonomously synchronize their acceleration, the steering, the braking, and their following distance. So for now, the platoon is controlled by a human driver operating the lead truck, with a backup driver in each of the following trucks. And proponents of these trials claim that the drafting advantages of the configuration, so that's where the front truck is braking the air pressure in the front and creating a drafting effect of for the trucks behind it, just like in car racing, can increase the efficiency, the fuel efficiency of these platoons by up to 10%, which is going to be huge. So, of course, that's me, and our company, Adiona, specializes in geo-optimization using machine learning and artificial intelligence to enhance operations and reduce fleet requirements. And we do this in a number of ways, and this is with one of our water delivery customers here in Australia called Neverfail. They're owned by Coca-Cola Amatil, and their workforce scheduler, Liz, uses technology like this to schedule hundreds of drivers to thousands of jobs every day. And it's natively inefficient. And so our technology takes systems that look like this and turns it into fully comprehensive systems that look like this, that allow for smart routing, bundling, and automated scheduling of entire fleets. That uses our proprietary algorithms. So the advantages of systems like this is we've been able to reduce their average delivery drive time by 48%, their average delivery distance by 36%, and we estimate the reduction in greenhouse gases to be about 7 megatons every year, which has been very significant for the business, and it's allowed them to completely reinvent the way that their fleets, which utilize a very large fleet of contract drivers, are maintained and managed. So in the US market, if we look at the expansion of these automated vehicles, Morgan Stanley estimates that the savings of transitioning to automated freight delivery to be a staggering $168 billion per year. So if you break that down, that's $35 billion in fuel, $70 billion in reduced labor costs, $36 billion in fewer accidents, and $27 billion in increased productivity. But it will not only save billions of dollars to switch to automated vehicles, but it also has the potential to save thousands of lives. Crashes involving large trucks killed almost 4,000 people in the US in 2014, and 110,000 people were injured. And more than 90% of the accidents were caused, at least in part, by driver error. And we all know that driver fatigue is a factor in roughly 1 of 7 fatal accidents. And all of this has triggered huge legal changes here in Australia, where the chain of responsibility laws have been overhauled to try and reduce these types of incidents. So how is all of this actually going to be implemented? How's it going to happen? This is a little pun on the slide because autonomous trucking is going to happen in stages. That's my little joke. First, there will be automated trucks with a human driver as a fail-safe, like I showed you in that drafting example. When it's applied to individual trucks, though, it'll allow the truckers to go beyond their current 11 or 12 hours per day on the road, because the driver will be able to rest and do other things during long stretches in remote areas. So think of it like autopilot through those remote areas where the pilot takes control of the takeoff and the landing. And this will increase the productivity of trucks and equipment, and likely a side effect will be reduction in wages of the truckers because the pay scales will have to be completely changed. So that's important to note for how this is going to play out. The next stage will have platoons of trucks, like that example, with the lead truck having a driver and others following automatically with no driver and no backup driver. So this will allow for that drafting effect and start to save even more in fuel costs and things like that. And there will be docking stations outside of urban areas where drivers will be able to enter with the trucks and then switch off and load to different vehicles for the last 20 kilometers. And at some point, as the industry becomes more and more automated, truck drivers will realize that the combination of much more efficient trips and the lower need for labor is going to dramatically shrink their total employment. So those that have other options than driving vehicles will flee for other things. But for many, their opportunities outside of truck driving will be minimal, and they know that. Hopefully, the lack of interest in the field will start to normalize part of this and minimize the people that are left out of work. And with the COVID-19 increase in deliveries and things like that, we're hitting a delay button on some of that. But certainly when autonomous vehicles catch up both technologically and legally, that's going to change the situation drastically. So I feel it's the duty of both organizations and governments to get ahead of this. We need to be aggressively reskilling at-risk workers and providing support for their families, and making sure that society will usher in this next industrial change. We really should learn from the mistakes of the past and invest in education for these people that are career-wise at risk. And so that brings me to the end. And if you remember three things from this talk, I want it to be that supply chain and logistics is under tremendous strain right now. It means that there's a tremendous opportunity for disruption. And this was already in process long before COVID-19, but the pandemic has greatly accelerated the shift to e-commerce and increased the need for efficiency and improvements in logistics. The second thing is that AI is coming in the form of things like on-demand optimization algorithms, cognitive procurement, and autonomous vehicles. This autonomous vehicle shift and revolution will start with long-haul trucking, but then it is coming for the mid and last mile. And the third thing is that our human skills like EQ, emotional intelligence, imagination, and divergent thinking skills will keep us relevant for a long time. And I really want to thank you all for joining me on this talk. It's been a really exciting opportunity to introduce us and what we think is happening in industry and what we're seeing. I also would remind you that we're giving away an Amazon Echo Dot. And so you're all in the running for that if you've been to this talk. I also want to point you to our website where you can play a game that we've developed. It's a route optimization game called Route Rival. And we'll be giving away prizes from attendees here to whoever gets the high score on our route optimization game. It's actually really fun, and you might see it on the App Store sometime soon. And we also are giving away half-day workshops so that companies that are interested in understanding both specifically how our technology works and on-demand optimization as a service works might be able to help them, and also how other techniques more generally might be able to help them, are invited to get in touch with me. My contact information is there and is available from Max as well. And we look forward to hearing from you and hearing some of your questions. So we open it up for questions right now, and I thank you for your time.